I didn't expect the cabin to feel like a threshold. I thought it would be a weekend away, trees quiet, a break from campus noise and the constant pressure to have answers I didn't have yet. Liam had pitched it as simple. My uncle's place. Nothing fancy. Just space. I said yes without thinking too much about it, which, in hindsight, was the first mistake. We arrived late afternoon, the sky already dipping into that amber hush that comes before evening. Pine trees crowded the narrow drive, their shadows stretching across the gravel like long fingers. The cabin itself sat back from the road, weathered but solid, the kind of place that had been standing long enough to feel like it remembered things. His uncle was on the porch when we pulled in. I knew his name, of course. Liam talked about him the way people talk about someone steady in their life. Someone dependable, quiet, unassuming. But nothing in those descriptions prepared me for the way he looked standing there, mug in hand, sleeves pushed up, eyes lifted toward us as if he'd been expecting more than just his nephew. He smiled when Liam jumped out of the car, pulled him into a brief hug. Then his attention shifted to me. "So you must be Noah," he said. His voice was calm, low, not rehearsed. When he extended his hand, I noticed the details I shouldn't have. The warmth of his grip, the faint roughness of his palm, the way his thumb pressed lightly as if to anchor the moment. "Yeah," I said. "Thanks for letting me come." "Of course," he replied. Any friend of Liam's. It should have ended there. Polite. Ordinary. But the way he looked at me didn't pass quickly. It lingered, not in a way that felt intrusive or inappropriate but observant. As if he were registering something about me he didn't yet have words for. I felt it settle in my chest, unexpected and unsettling. Inside, the cabin smelled like wood and old paper. There were shelves of books, framed photos, a couch worn soft by time. It felt lived in, not curated. Aaron showed us around, pointing out where things were with an easy familiarity. When he opened the door to the guest room and told me it was mine, I noticed it was directly across the hall from his. That detail lodged itself somewhere it didn't need to be. Dinner was simple. Soup, bread, quiet laughter. Liam filled the space easily, telling stories from school, complaining about classes, plans, people. Aaron listened more than he spoke, nodding, asking questions that cut straight to the heart of whatever Liam was skirting around. Every so often his gaze flicked toward me, not interrupting, just checking in. I found myself hyper-aware of my posture, my hands, the sound of my own laugh. It was ridiculous. He wasn't doing anything wrong. If anything, he was just being kind. After dinner, Liam stepped outside to take a call. The silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. Aaron and I moved around the kitchen washing dishes. At one point he handed me a towel. Our fingers brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, but my breath caught anyway. "Long drive?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "But worth it." He smiled, a small curve at the corner of his mouth. "It usually is." The porch light flicked on as the sun dipped lower. Crickets started up in the distance. When Liam came back in, everything snapped back into place. Noise, movement, normalcy. Later that night, I retreated to my room, exhausted in a way that didn't match the day. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the cabin settle. Footsteps in the hall. A door closing softly. I told myself I was imagining things. That the tightness in my chest was just nerves, just new surroundings, just the unfamiliar quiet. But the way he'd looked at me stayed. Not hungry. Not inappropriate. Curious. Careful. Like he was standing at the edge of something too, and hadn't decided whether to step forward. As sleep finally crept in, one thought circled quietly in my mind, persistent as the wind moving through the trees outside. Whatever this weekend was supposed to be, it wasn't going to stay simple. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the cabin roof, light at first, then steady, as if the morning itself had decided to move slowly. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The bed felt unfamiliar beneath me, the air cooler than I was used to. Then memory settled in, the drive, the trees, the way Aaron had looked at me, and my chest tightened all over again. I pulled on a sweatshirt and stepped into the hall. The cabin was quiet except for the rain and the low hum of something heating in the kitchen. Aaron was there, standing by the counter with a mug already in his hand, the sleeves of his worn gray t-shirt pushed up. His hair looked slightly damp, like he'd already been outside. He turned when he heard me. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, suddenly aware of how close my voice sounded in the small space. We moved around each other without discussion, the rhythm of making coffee falling into place naturally. When I reached for the cabinet, he shifted back, giving me room, his shoulder brushing my arm as he passed. It was such a small thing. It shouldn't have meant anything. But the contact stayed with me, sharp and warm, like my body had memorized it. Liam didn't appear. Aaron glanced toward the hallway once, then smiled faintly. "He'll sleep through anything," he said. "Especially after a long drive." "That checks out," I said, relaxing a little. We sat at the small wooden table near the window, mugs steaming between us. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the trees into soft green shadows. The quiet wasn't awkward, but it wasn't empty either. It felt like something waiting. "So," Aaron said after a while, "Liam says you're almost done with school." "Almost," I said. "I think I'm more tired of deciding things than actually doing them." He nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what I meant. "Sometimes it feels like everyone else got a manual," he said. "And we're just improvising." I laughed quietly. "Yeah, that." The thunder came without warning, deep, close, rattling the windows. I flinched before I could stop myself. Aaron was on his feet instantly. "Hey," he said gently, reaching out. His hand landed on my shoulder, steady and reassuring. The contact grounded me more than the words. His thumb pressed lightly just once before he seemed to realize what he was doing. His hand stayed there for half a second longer than necessary, then withdrew. "Sorry," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's okay," I replied, though my heart had started racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the storm. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof. A flash of lightning lit the room, followed by another low roll of thunder. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then everything went dark. Liam shouted something from his room, half asleep and confused. Aaron sighed softly. "Breaker's old," he said. "Happens sometimes." He moved confidently through the dim, opening drawers, lighting candles. The warm glow filled the cabin, replacing the overhead lights with something softer, more intimate. Shadows stretched along the walls. The space felt smaller, closer. We sat on the couch, the only place warm enough to feel comfortable while the storm raged on. I perched on one end, trying not to overthink how near he was. Our knees brushed accidentally when he shifted. Neither of us moved away. "I can grab a blanket," he offered. "I'm fine," I said quickly. Too quickly. He nodded but didn't pull back. Instead, he rested his arm along the back of the couch, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. I was suddenly hyper-aware of everything. My breathing, the rise and fall of his chest, the faint scent of soap and pine that clung to him. "This storm might last a while," he said quietly. "I don't mind," I replied. And I meant it. Silence settled again, thick but not uncomfortable. Outside, rain fell in sheets, isolating the cabin from the rest of the world. Inside, candlelight flickered between us. I turned my head slightly and caught him looking at me. Not casually. Not in passing. He looked like he was thinking. Like he was weighing something carefully. His expression wasn't hunger or certainty, it was restraint. Awareness. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Liam's door creaked open, followed by a groggy complaint about the power being out. The moment shattered. Aaron leaned back, his arm dropping from the couch. "Go back to sleep," he called softly. "We've got it handled." Liam mumbled something and disappeared again. When the quiet returned, it felt different, charged, fragile. Aaron cleared his throat. "We should probably check the breaker once the rain eases," he said. "Yeah," I agreed. But neither of us moved right away. Too close to be nothing. And too careful to call it anything else. The power stayed out through most of the afternoon, as if the storm had decided the cabin needed to learn how to listen instead of talk. The rain softened eventually, slipping from a roar into a steady whisper. The world beyond the windows looked rinsed clean, edges blurred, colors deeper somehow. Liam slept through all of it. Aaron and I drifted through the hours without a plan. We read for a while, separate books, same couch, careful not to touch but aware of the narrow space between us. At some point, he handed me a novel from the shelf, insisting I'd like it. Our fingers brushed again. This time, neither of us apologized. Conversation came in fragments. He asked about my family, my plans, the places I wanted to see someday. I asked about his life in careful steps, sensing there were doors he didn't open easily. Still, he answered honestly, thoughtfully, as if he trusted me with more than surface-level truths. The silence between questions grew heavier, but not awkward. It felt deliberate, as if both of us were letting it stretch to see what might rise to the surface. Late afternoon light filtered in through the windows when Aaron finally spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. Do you ever feel like you're out of sync?" He smiled faintly, but there was something serious beneath it. "Like everyone else knows the rhythm and you're half a beat behind?" The question landed harder than I expected. I stared at the floor, then nodded. Yeah, I said quietly. All the time. He let out a slow breath, relieved in a way that surprised me. I felt that way for years, he admitted. Tried to ignore it. Thought if I stayed busy enough, it would pass. Did it? I asked. He shook his head. No. It just got louder. We didn't speak after that, but the silence felt different now, charged with shared understanding. He wasn't lecturing me or offering advice. He was letting me see him. Later we stepped out onto the porch together. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the air cool and clean. Mist rose from the forest floor, curling around the trunks of the trees like something alive. This place helps me breathe, he said, leaning against the railing. When things get too loud in my head. I leaned beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. I get that, I said. It feels honest out here. He glanced at me, something soft in his expression. Yeah, he agreed. It does. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth. Without thinking, I rubbed my hands together, trying to warm them. Aaron noticed immediately. Cold? He asked. A little. He hesitated, then shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The fabric was warm from his body, heavy and grounding. I looked up at him, caught off guard. Thanks, I said. Anytime, he replied, his voice quieter than before. Our eyes held for a moment too long. The world narrowed again, just like it had on the couch earlier. This time neither of us rushed to look away. Footsteps sounded behind us. Liam, finally awake and restless. The spell broke. Aaron stepped back, clearing his throat. Power still out? Liam asked. For now, Aaron said easily. Storm probably knocked something loose. The rest of the evening passed gently. Dinner cooked on the gas stove. Candles lit the table. Laughter returned, lighter now, easier. But underneath it all, there was something unspoken, humming just beneath the surface. Later that night, after Liam went to bed, Aaron and I sat by the fire. The flames crackled softly, filling the cabin with warmth and light. I don't usually talk like that, he said suddenly, eyes on the fire. About feeling out of sync? I asked. About anything, he replied. Not with people I just met. I swallowed. I'm glad you did. He nodded once, as if committing that moment to memory. When I finally stood to go to bed, he looked up at me, hesitation flickering across his face. Good night, Noah, he said. Good night, Aaron. In my room, I lay awake long after the fire died down. The silence pressed in, no longer empty. It carried his words, his jacket still warm on my shoulders, the look in his eyes when he'd said he didn't usually open up. Something had shifted. It hadn't been loud or dramatic. But in the quiet, I felt it clearly. Something in the silence had changed the shape of everything. Night settled over the cabin slowly, like it was reluctant to fully arrive. The fire burned low in the hearth, its glow casting long shadows that moved gently across the walls. Liam had gone to bed an hour earlier, exhausted and content, leaving the rest of the cabin wrapped in a quiet that felt intentional. Aaron and I stayed by the fire. Neither of us said out loud that we weren't ready to end the night. We didn't need to. The silence between us had taken on a familiar weight, no longer uncertain, just attentive. Like it was listening along with us. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending a small burst of sparks upward. I watched his hands as he did it, steady, careful, like everything else about him. When he leaned back in his chair, he let out a slow breath. This place, he said quietly, it's where I came when things fell apart. I turned toward him. When? He hesitated, then looked at me, really looked this time. After my marriage ended, he said. I hadn't known he was married until that moment. The word landed gently but firmly between us. I'm sorry, I said. He nodded once. It was a long time ago. But some things don't leave just because time passes. The fire popped softly. I waited, giving him space to decide how much to say. I loved her, he continued. Still do, in a way. But I didn't know how to be honest about the parts of myself that didn't fit the life we built. I thought I could stay quiet and it would be enough. I felt something tighten in my chest. Was it? He smiled sadly. No. I didn't think before I moved. I stood, crossed the small space between us and wrapped my arms around him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was instinctive, like my body understood before my mind caught up. For a brief second he froze. Then his shoulders relaxed. His arms came up slowly, settling around my back. One hand rested between my shoulder blades, firm and grounding. The other stayed low, careful, as if he were afraid of crossing an invisible line. We didn't speak. The hug stretched on, longer than anything I'd shared with someone I barely knew. His breath evened out against my shoulder. I felt the weight of his history, his restraint, his quiet strength, all of it pressed gently into that single moment. When he finally pulled back, it was just enough to look at me. His hands lingered at my sides, then dropped reluctantly. "Thank you," he said softly. I nodded, unsure what to say. Something flickered across his face then, uncertainty, maybe even fear. He took a step back, putting distance between us. He stopped, exhaled. I should probably call it a night. "Yeah," I said, even though part of me didn't want to let the moment end. "Of course." He paused at the doorway, glancing back once, like he was about to say something else. But then he just nodded and disappeared down the hall. In my room I lay awake, heart still racing. I replayed the hug over and over, the way his hands had felt, the way he'd held me like it mattered. That touch stayed. It followed me into sleep, into dreams that felt heavier and warmer than anything I'd known before. I woke sometime in the night to the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway. A door opened. Close. Silence returned. My chest tightened with a strange mix of longing and restraint. Whatever line we were standing near, we both felt it. And neither of us had stepped back far enough to forget it. I didn't sleep much after that. Not because I was restless in the usual way, but because my mind kept circling the same quiet moment, again and again, the weight of his arms around me, the way he'd held back even as he held on. There was something achingly deliberate about it, like he'd been choosing restraint one breath at a time. Morning came softly, pale light slipping through the curtains. The cabin was still, wrapped in that early-hour hush where everything feels suspended. I lay there longer than necessary, listening for sounds in the hallway, wondering if I'd imagined how charged the night before had been. When I finally got up, the smell of coffee reached me before I reached the kitchen. Aaron stood at the counter again, just like the morning before. Different shirt. Same calm posture. But when he turned and saw me, something shifted in his expression. Something unguarded, fleeting, and real. "Morning," he said. "Morning." Our voices were quieter than usual, like we were standing in a library instead of a kitchen. Liam was still asleep. The house belonged to us for a little while longer. We moved around each other carefully, like two people learning the shape of a new room. When I reached for a mug, our hands brushed again. This time neither of us pulled away right away. "I kept thinking about last night," he said suddenly, eyes on the counter. My breath caught. "Me too." He nodded once, as if that confirmation mattered more than he'd expected. "I just want to be clear," he continued, choosing his words with care. "I don't regret it. I don't want to misunderstand anything." I leaned back against the counter, giving myself something solid to hold on to. "I don't think it was a misunderstanding," I said. "At least not for me." He looked up, then really looked. There was vulnerability there now, no longer hidden behind composure. "It doesn't feel like nothing," he said quietly. The words landed between us, gentle but undeniable. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." Silence followed, not the heavy kind but the kind that makes room for truth. Aaron stepped closer, stopping just in front of me. Not touching. Just present. "I don't want to rush this," he said. "And I don't want to pretend I don't feel it either." My chest tightened, emotion rising faster than I could manage. "I don't need rushing," I said. "I just don't want to be invisible." His expression softened immediately. "You're not," he said. "Not to me." He lifted his hand slowly, like he was giving me time to step away. When I didn't, he rested his forehead gently against mine. The contact was light, careful, intimate in a way that made my throat ache. We breathed together, sharing the same quiet space. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Not of you. Of getting this wrong." "Me too," I said. "But I think not trying would be worse." He smiled then, a small, sincere smile that reached his eyes. "You're braver than you think." "I don't feel brave," I replied. "Most people don't," he said softly. Our foreheads stayed pressed together. His hand hovered at my side, then settled there, warm and steady. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was permission. Footsteps sounded down the hall. Liam's door creaked open. Aaron stepped back immediately, the moment folding in on itself but not disappearing. "Smells good," Liam said, oblivious as ever. Breakfast passed easily enough. Conversation returned to safe topics. But every so often Aaron's knee brushed mine under the table, accidental enough to be deniable, deliberate enough to make my heart skip. Later, while Liam showered, Aaron and I stood by the window again, watching sunlight spill across the clearing where the rain had fallen. "I don't know what this becomes," he said quietly. I don't either, I admitted. He glanced at me then reached out, just briefly, his fingers brushing mine. But what if it's real? He asked. I turned my hand, letting our fingers tangle for a second before pulling away. Then we'll figure it out, I said. His smile lingered long after he looked away. And for the first time since arriving at the cabin, the question didn't scare me. It steadied me. What if this was real? I didn't have the answer yet. But I knew I wanted to stay long enough to find out. The rest of the day unfolded without urgency, like time itself had agreed to slow down for us. Liam wanted to hike after breakfast, insisting the trail behind the cabin would look different after the storm. Aaron hesitated, glancing briefly at me, a silent question, but I nodded. I wanted to see the world outside the charged quiet of the cabin, to understand whether what we felt could exist beyond candlelight and stillness. The forest was damp and alive, leaves glistening, air cool and sharp in my lungs. Liam walked ahead, humming to himself, stopping occasionally to point out something interesting before moving on again. Aaron and I followed at a comfortable distance, not speaking much but never losing awareness of each other. At one point the trail narrowed. I slipped on wet earth, catching myself just in time. Aaron's hand shot out, gripping my forearm instinctively. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, laughing lightly. Just clumsy. He didn't let go right away. His thumb pressed once, reassuring, before he released me. The moment was brief, unremarkable to anyone watching. But I felt it all the way through me. The hike ended at a small clearing overlooking the lake. The water reflected the sky perfectly, broken only by the ripple of a bird landing near the shore. Liam skipped stones, absorbed in his own world. Aaron and I stood side by side, close but not touching. This is my favorite spot, he said. I used to come here when I needed to think. About what? I asked. About who I was allowed to be, he replied quietly. I turned toward him. And what did you decide? He met my eyes, something steady and sure there now. That I spent too long waiting for permission. The words settled into me, heavy and hopeful all at once. When we returned to the cabin, Liam announced he needed a nap. He disappeared into his room, leaving the place quiet again. Not empty, just open. Aaron and I made tea and sat on the porch steps. Sunlight warmed the wood beneath us. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I don't feel like I need to explain myself around you, he said suddenly. I feel the same, I admitted. Like I can just be. He smiled. That's rare. We talked then, not about labels or plans but about small things. Favorite books. Music that made us feel understood. Moments in our lives that had felt like turning points, even if we hadn't recognized them at the time. At one point he laughed, really laughed, and I realized I hadn't heard that sound from him before. It was warm and unguarded, like something he didn't give away easily. I didn't know I was waiting, he said, more to himself than to me, for this kind of ease. I looked at him, heart full in a way I didn't quite know how to name. I think I was too, I said. The afternoon light softened into gold. Without thinking, I rested my head briefly against his shoulder. He tensed for just a fraction of a second, then relaxed. His arm came up, resting loosely around me, not pulling me closer, just staying. We sat like that for a long time. When I finally lifted my head, our faces were close. Close enough that I could feel his breath, see the faint lines at the corner of his eyes. He leaned in, slow enough that I could stop him if I wanted to. I didn't. The kiss was gentle, more a meeting than an action. Soft, brief and careful. It didn't ask for more. It simply acknowledged what was already there. When we pulled back, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Inside, Liam's laughter echoed faintly from his room, a reminder of the world beyond the porch, beyond the quiet space we'd carved out together. Aaron rested his forehead against mine again, just for a second. Whatever this is, he said, I'm grateful. So am I replied. As the sun dipped lower, I realized something quietly, almost with surprise. I hadn't come to the cabin looking for anything. But somehow I'd found something I didn't know I was waiting for. Morning arrived without ceremony. The light slipped through the trees and into the cabin in pale gold bands, settling softly on the floor, the walls, the quiet corners where the weekend had unfolded. I woke before my alarm, heart calm in a way that felt unfamiliar. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I needed to rush anywhere. I lay still for a moment, listening. The cabin breathed around me, the faint creak of wood, the distant call of a bird, the low hum of someone moving in the kitchen. Aaron, I realized. The thought brought a quiet smile to my face. When I stepped into the hallway, I found him standing at the stove, flipping pancakes with an ease that suggested this was his way of saying goodbye to a place he loved. He looked over his shoulder when he heard me. "Morning," he said, voice warm but steady. "Morning." We didn't rush into anything. There was no tension this time, no uncertainty humming between us. Just a gentle awareness, like we'd both agreed to hold the moment carefully. Liam wandered in not long after, yawning, already talking about the drive back. Breakfast passed in easy conversation. No one said anything out of place. No one needed to. Afterward, Liam went outside to load the car. Aaron and I lingered in the kitchen, the quiet returning like an old friend. "I'm glad you came," he said, leaning against the counter. "Me too," I replied. "I didn't realize how much I needed the quiet." He nodded. "It has a way of telling the truth." We stepped out onto the porch together. The forest looked different in the morning light, less mysterious, more honest. Birds darted between branches. The lake shimmered through the trees. "I don't want this to feel like something that only exists here," he said carefully. "It doesn't have to," I said. "Not if we don't let it." He smiled, a little uncertain but hopeful. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "I just know I don't want to pretend this didn't happen." "Neither do I said. He reached out, his hand finding mine naturally this time. We stood like that, fingers intertwined, no rush to let go. Liam's voice called out from the car, breaking the moment gently instead of shattering it. Aaron released my hand, but his thumb brushed my knuckles once before he did. At the car, he pulled me into a hug. Not the careful kind this time. Not restrained. Just warm and real. "Drive safe," he said quietly. "I will." As I got into the passenger seat, I looked back at the cabin one last time. At the porch. At Aaron standing there, hands in his pockets, watching me leave with an expression I knew I'd remember. The road unfolded ahead of us, winding through trees, back toward a life that hadn't changed, but felt different somehow. I leaned my head against the window, letting the hum of the tires settle me. I hadn't expected this weekend to give me answers. I hadn't asked it to. But it had given me something better. A moment of truth, a connection that didn't demand explanation, a quiet certainty that I was allowed to feel what I felt. Whatever this becomes, I thought, it started honestly. And for the first time that felt like enough.